Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Press House Student Spotlights. Thanks once again for joining us on this video series journey. And today I am thrilled to be joined by Kevin Lee. And so I'll let Kevin introduce himself and tell us a little bit more about himself. So Kevin, tell us, we know your name is Kevin. Tell us your pronouns, where you're from, and your year at UW-Madison and what you're studying.
I'm Kevin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm from Korea, but I lived more of my life in Shanghai, China. My year in UW-Madison, I'm in my third year right now. And I've been studying computer science and information science.
Awesome. And yeah, you sort of mentioned the kind of complexity of that question of where you're from, because you're from Korea, you spent a lot of time in Shanghai, you also spent some time in Texas.
I did, yeah.
And now you're at UW-Madison. So give us a little sense of how you got here, given the fact that you're from so many different places.
Yeah, well, my parents, ever since they had me, originally wanted me to go to high school and potentially college in the United States, just because, there's a lot of limitations that they felt was present in the Korean education system. But our family got lucky that my dad got the opportunity to go to Shanghai for his company. And so we moved there when I was 10, and there I went to an international school, which is pretty comparable to maybe going to like a private high school or private school in the US. So we spoke English for all of our classes, and I had a lot of American and Australian, all sorts of friends from different places. And the reason why I was in Texas was because my parents were afraid that, my dad was afraid that he might not be able to stay in Shanghai for the entire time I'll be finishing up high school. So he decided that he could just send me to Texas, where my aunt lives, and finish high school there, and then hopefully get in-state tuition. But then they were like, you know what, families should stay together. And again, we got pretty lucky that we could stay in Shanghai for the entire duration of my high school. So it worked out, and then because I was always under English instruction, I thought that going back to Korea would be harder. My dad pushed for it a lot because tuition in Korea is a lot cheaper. But because I chose to do computer science, which, the US is the birthplace of it, and also because I convinced him that I would graduate in 3 years. Specifically why I came to UW-Madison is just because it was like one of the two schools that I got into in the US. I applied to a lot of them, but looking back, I think I didn't quite understand what universities were looking for. But it was like a pleasant surprise coming here, because ever since the first day I was just like, am I on vacation or am I on campus? The first week was crazy.
You mentioned a couple times computer science, but I want to give you some credit, because I feel like computer science as your degree does not quite sum up sort of what you're studying and what you're interested in. And I just want to highlight that for a second, because I think it's very interesting, and I think the people watching will think that it's interesting. So would you mind telling us a little bit more about sort of your field of interest and what you want to study going forward in graduate school and beyond?
Yeah. So what I want to study in graduate school, and the kind of research that I've been doing so far, is under what people call human-computer interactions, where we're just studying the relationship between humans and computers, because computer science tends to be a very rigorous and technical field where we focus on progress a lot. And I think one of my biggest lessons in terms of you know, as a person learning computer science at UW-Madison, was in one of my classes where my mentor now taught me that the progress of technology shouldn't just be measured by how much we have of it, and we have to be much more critical about the interaction between humans and computers, because ultimately these very technical things are what we use every day, and what a lot of these days what a lot of our relationships are built upon. And so, you know, it's coming to understand these very technical things as social artifacts, and yeah, I just want to continue studying that, specifically how technology reflects us.
I feel like for you, it's interesting seeing kind of the intersections of the things that you study. Like I'll see you working on some sort of very technical coding project, and then the next thing you're reading some like philosophical treatise, and it's like those things are merging for you in really, really interesting ways.
Yeah, and that merge is not something that I expected to happen when I came here. Just because even before I came here, I think I had a pretty clear-cut idea of what I was probably going to do after graduating, and what kind of things I was probably going to learn here. But yeah, it turned out that I was interested in a lot of other things than computer science.
So now you're in your third and final year. Sadly, I wish we got 4 years with you, but we only get 3. But you know, thinking about your time here as a student, what's been one of your most memorable experiences so far?
Yeah, looking back, I think the first day I got to Wisconsin was probably my most memorable experience. Just because it was a big shock to me. I didn't know anyone in Wisconsin, and I ended up flying from Korea to here, or actually no, from Shanghai to here with like 4 big luggages. And yeah, I got to the Madison airport, got in an Uber, put all those luggages in, and yeah, I just drove from the airport to here. And I remember on the Uber ride, I was just looking out the window, and it just seemed so different from where I came from. People looked very different, dressed very different, and I think the ways that people carried themselves looked very different, just from sitting in the Uber.
Yeah.
And again, there was that shock of like, am I on vacation? But then I was still under the stress of how am I going to get to meet all these people, because already I saw like groups forming. And yeah, I remember feeling pretty miserable about like putting the 4 big suitcases in one of those big red carts and moving it up to my dorm. But then things got a lot better that day when I realized that my roommate was Korean American. So that was one of my biggest worries, and we got along really well as roommates, and we're still roommates. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of shock on that first day, which still my most memorable experience.
And it wasn't too long after that first day that you came to Press House for the first time. So tell us a little bit about what made you decide to come to Press House.
Yeah, I got baited. Yeah, there's the Wisconsin Welcome app that all the freshmen use when they get on campus. And I've been making a mental list of what orgs I want to join on campus. And one of them was some kind of music organization. And on the Wisconsin Welcome app, I think it was on Wednesday, it said music team. And it was very unassuming name. Like I didn't know what to expect, but it said music on it, and I was in a very adventurous mindset just because of the nature of the first week. So I was like, I'll go. And again, the name Press House, Presbyterian, is very sneaky. So I did not expect that it would be, preparing for worship on Sunday.
And I just want to say, as the person who puts the names of things into the Wisconsin Welcome app on behalf of Press House, there was no intentional bait and switch happening there. It was truly just, in my head I said, we call that music team. I will type in music team.
Yeah.
Since then, we have adjusted the description in the app so that it's more clear. But this first year that we put it in the app, it just said music team. Yeah.
I mean, it turned out to be great. A church community was something that I probably would have looked for. But again, I think a lot of people who come in might agree with this, but I think there's always this charm of like identity shifting or like reinventing yourself. And so this Christianity thing that I grew up with for a long time was something that I wanted to like put to the test here. And so maybe it wasn't like the first thing that I was looking for, but it turned out, in my personal opinion, to be for the better. And yeah, I met Natalie, our music director, there, and have been making great music since then. Yeah, that's how I found Press House.
Tell me a little bit more about your experience here at Press House. So, what would you say is maybe one of your more memorable Press House experiences?
My more memorable. I think it probably is this one time you were preaching. The sermon that you preached that day was on this idea of, well, simply put, it's to die to live again. And I think you did it on Romans. And for some reason, that was not the kind of message that I expected it at Press House. Just because it hasn't been something at that point, a topic that I would have discussions about or have talked about with people here. And I almost think I had some kind of wall developing in terms of this other community that I was more comfortable with, and the Press House community where I could only talk about certain things. And I think on that day, you kind of broke open that wall for me because, I mean, everyone else was listening to your sermon. And I've had conversations about it with other people during our extended communion dinner. And I realized that much more people were curious about what that meant than I expected them to. And that was very reassuring for me. And I think, one of the biggest motivations why I chose to stay at Press House.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, we've talked over the past year about sort of that struggle you experienced of feeling tugs in multiple directions. And I think that is a challenge that is uniquely present for a lot of folks who are not white in communities and in campuses where most people are. And it's been a joy to sort of be with you on that experience of figuring out where you want to be and the kind of communities that you want to belong to.
Yeah.
But I know that the journey wasn't easy.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that you're still here.
Yeah.
So one of our main mission objectives here at Press House is to help students develop a deeper and more mature faith. And you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I would love to hear, in your experience, how has Press House helped you develop a deeper and more mature faith?
Yeah, I think Press House has definitely pushed boundaries for me in terms of what I know as Christianity. I think having grown up in specifically Korean churches, even when I was in Shanghai, there's this mishmash of Korean, pious and cultural traditions and stuff mixed with this religion of Christianity that makes a very specific kind of theology that's kind of limiting, maybe shameful, or make people feel a lot of shame. And also just a little bit, behind the veil. People in our church, in a lot of the Korean churches that I've been in, cared a lot about the social dynamics, which is important, but in a way that was what I felt to be a little bit toxic. And that aside, I think, a lot of kind of lessons that my pastors taught me were not purely of scripture, but more about these rules and things that you need to follow to be a Christian. And I think a lot of those things we question a lot at Press House. In terms of, I think I just grew a lot more curiosity in reading the Bible and making sure that things that I didn't understand, I didn't just pass it as something I didn't understand and that I didn't have to understand, but rather something that, should be questioned and should be answered, no matter if there ever is going to be an answer or not. I think I've just learned to value the process of asking questions. I think, there are other things too, I recently joined Erica for Taekwondo. And it was a shock to me that that's something that she saw as a prayer practice. And that is definitely not what anyone says or has said to me in my previous churches. It's definitely boundary pushing. But it was one of those experiences that I had to experience to understand. And I think having the freedom to experience these things is very important to me because, I think I've come to appreciate the fact that spirituality comes in many different forms. And, Taekwondo has been a part of my journey in finding what that means to me. And now I'm in council leading a Bible study. And my co-leader is, I would say, quite different from me, just from where we came from and what we believe in and, various other things. But I think because we share the same curiosity for the Bible, I've been able to grow and learn a lot from just us meeting together and sharing our, views on what passages we wanted to bring to our group, and with two different viewpoints, how we're gonna love the people that we're serving better.
At Press House, we often say our motto is bring all of who you are. We have it stamped on the side of the building. It's kind of one of the things that's really central to our identity here. And so I'm curious, in your experience, how have you seen that motto bring all of you who you are in action here at Press House?
Yeah. I think I have a little bit of a complicated relationship with that.
Yeah.
I think initially when I came to Press House, I was overwhelmed by the sense of welcome because I think a lot of the things that I tried to do to meet people and socialize at the beginning of freshman year were things that kind of took away my identity to homogenize with the people that I was trying to meet. And I think that took away from what I was originally trying to do, which was getting to meet people who are different from me. And I think, Press House definitely invited me and tried to understand who I was. For some reason, I found it difficult to bring a lot of my cultural identities, or just maybe things about God that I believed in or wanted to talk to someone about. And I think I had this thought where I actually found it more difficult to talk about God than any other subject. And that gave me kind of an identity crisis of like, what am I doing at church?
Yeah.
But I think one of the probably the biggest thing that wanted me to stay was because of how compassionate both you and Erica were to me. And I think there were just certain things about me being an international student or from Korea, or all these things that are attached to me that you two were very inquisitive about and curious to know about. I think I came to grow with you two in a way where I actually wanted to make sure that I can act on making sure that this space is a comfortable space for people like me. I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned from you two was that, there are ways that I can do something about it. And so that was one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to join council.
All right, so I have one more question for you, and then we're going to shift into some rapid fire questions. But, thinking about your sort of whole experience, becoming a UW-Madison student, joining Press House, your time here, if you were sitting down with someone who was interested in joining a faith community in college, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them that that's not a good way to start. I think I would tell myself maybe that you shouldn't sacrifice breadth for depth. And I think, I think for me, I was tempted to go as broad as possible, meet as many different types of people as possible, and join as many orgs as possible. But in the end, a lot of the people that I said, introduced myself to in freshman year, I forgot all of them. And I think the people that have stayed most important to me were people who I tried to develop a relationship with. And I think, especially in the context of a faith community, I think it's important to get to know the people in it better, because it is definitely different from other communities on campus. And I think one of the most blessing things about a faith community is that people always have something to testify about why they're there, why they believe in the things that they believe. And personally, I've learned a lot from people who have shared stories, and those stories have been a big part of my growth as a Christian. So yeah, get to spend lots of time and maybe be prepared for, conversations that might not go as you expected. But I think if you try a couple times, it'll be rewarding.
That's great advice, Kevin.
Thanks.
All right, my friend, shall we do some rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Okay, so I have 4 sets of questions here, and you can choose any one of them. So choose a number between 1 and 4.
4.
4, all right. Here we go.
Rainy and warm. Oh, probably hip hop. I'll do Kuyo. It's the username I use for a lot of my stuff. It's because Kevin, and then my Korean name starts with a W, and my last name is Lee, and then that turned around is Yo. I would say coffee.
I knew it. I knew you would say coffee, and I almost thought about not asking you because I knew what you would say.
I mean, yeah, it is a pretty obvious answer, but there's just a depth to coffee that people are missing out on, and you can get so much out of it if you spend a couple more dollars. Actually, you don't even need to spend that much dollars. If you're in Madison, you can go down to the Capitol. There's this cafe called Bradbury's. Their prices are cheaper than Starbucks and whatever me is drinking here, and it's fantastic. So maybe a panda. Does Marvel count?
Yeah, Marvel's Disney.
Yeah, Iron Man.
Okay.
I don't know a lot of mythical creatures. Yeah, I'll just say that.
Okay.
Do you think writing blogs is a job?
Oh, for sure.
Okay. How about making myself coffee in the morning? It would probably be to die and live again. My faith.
Thanks for sitting down with me today, Kevin.
Thank you for asking great questions.
And thank you for joining us for this new installment in the Press House Student Spotlight series. And we'll see you next time. Peace.